All right, so now we're going to move on to replacing the brake lines. So one of the first things I want to do is remove the fender from the motorcycle so we have access to all the connections underneath here. It feels like a 3mm. And of course, nothing can be easy. Looks like that one the head is stripped out on. I cannot get it to bite. Yeah, it's just spinning in there. So we're going to have to see if we can find something else. See if we can bump up to a 4, but I got a feeling that's going to be too big. Yeah, it's way too big. Pull out a couple of the tool sets here. Because it's a 3mm Allen, sometimes you might get lucky and be able to get a Torx bit to fit in there and bite when they're boogered up. And what makes this difficult is you can't get your head underneath the fairing to be able to see. But it looks like that, if I tap it in there, it might want to go. So we'll give that a try. Didn't feel like it went in very good. Nope, no good. Alright, so that one bolt looks like it's the only thing holding it on. And I hate to say it, we may have to drill it out because it just can't bite on it. It's recessed down into that fender. So what I have here is my Mac Tool 35-piece reverse drill bit set. Sometimes when you use a reverse drill bit, you get lucky and it will actually grab the bolt and spin it out. But if not, we'll drill the head off of it, remove the fender, then we should be able to get to. So what I'm going to use here is this little Milwaukee angle style drill, just because I think it'll give me more room in there. It's still going to be tight, but hopefully it will do what I need it to do. All right, head of the screw came off. I think we did it without damaging the fender any. Yeah, we did good. So now we'll have to see if we can extract that bolt. Looks like there's a bunch of sand and grit caught up in there, so I'm just gonna blast it off with some brake clean. And hit it with some AMSOIL MP metal protector. Lubricates, freeze rusty parts. All right, so I'm gonna try this smaller pair of vice grips, and hopefully I can get a hold of that enough to break it loose. All right, it felt like it just broke loose, so I'm just gonna work it a little bit. Very slow process, but it's working, and that's what matters. All right, now I can get it with my fingers. And there she is. So now we're going to move to the master cylinder. You see I put a couple rags here just to protect the paint. Now the spot right to like directly below the master cylinder is actually a plastic. And the brake fluid won't hurt the plastic any because it's not painted. But we do have the yellow painted fairing that's right there along the side of it. So we want to try to catch anything that may possibly drip. So there's 4 Phillips head screws that hold the top of this master cylinder cap on. Take out the 4 screws. Set them in a safe place. You just use the handle of my screwdriver. Tap a couple times. You see, there it goes. All right. The master cylinder is pretty much dry already because the line had already burst. And actually, I don't think I mentioned that yet, but I mentioned earlier that, or in the last video, that the line had collapsed. So the master cylinder was producing enough pressure to get fluid past the obstruction and apply the brake. But when you release the master cylinder, that pressure is supposed to bleed back off into the master cylinder so that the wheel roll freely. Because the line was collapsed, that pressure wasn't being able to be released. So it was maintaining the pressure past the collapse in the caliper, causing the brakes to just stay locked up. Now, if it sat for any period of time, it would slowly bleed off, but not fast enough to do anything. And if you were to try to ride the motorcycle in a situation like that, because of that pressure that would stay on there, that brake rotor turning would increase so much heat in there that would actually increase that pressure, and eventually the brake would just lock up on you while you're riding. So it's a very dangerous situation. But anyway, in my process to try to clean out the lines and make it all work, I actually had them working for a little while, and then I went to go pump it up, and then boom, the line burst. So it's garbage. And that's why there's no fluid in here at the moment, because it had all drained out already. So at this point, we're ready to start disconnecting and removing the lines. All right, so it looks like the line here at the bottom of the master cylinder is 14 millimeter. We're just gonna go ahead and break that loose. We'll pull that banjo bolt and the washers, just set them aside. Our next connection is down here on the frame, where it goes to the frame rail. It is also 14 millimeter. Crack that loose. And we'll take out that banjo bolt and the crush washers. I'm going to set it next. I'm keeping this stuff in somewhat of an order. All right, and that top hose is out. Now this is the end that went to the master cylinder. This end went to the frame. I'm just going to lay it on the ground right there in that same orientation, just so I can kind of recall where it goes to when it goes back. So now we've got the lower hose that goes from the metal line on the frame down to the forks, and it's a slightly different style. It has more of a swivel fitting on it. Again, it's still 14 millimeter. Break it loose. And that one comes down here to this distribution point. And again, banjo bolt here, crush washer in the next order. Now notice at the top, it didn't have a banjo bolt, it was a swivel fitting. Again, I'm going to lay that hose in that order so I can always remember what order to go back in if necessary. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the right side hose. And then last on this side, where the brake line meets the caliper. We'll lay that one next to the wheel. Go ahead and break the next side loose. Now it looks like this distribution block is slightly cockeyed, and that's why I'm having trouble getting the wrench into this one. I can get it, I just have to get it at the right angle. All right, should be one more connection down to the wheel on this side. Okay, so all of the brake lines have now been removed. What I'm going to do is clean out this distribution block. I'm going to clean it out with some brake parts cleaner. So you get a little bit of debris out of it. Now I took the calipers apart and cleaned them all out a couple weeks ago when I had this, so I'm not going to go through that on this video. But a lot of times when I take a vehicle that's been sitting this long or the system is that old, and you do something like break the lines open in order to replace them, I go ahead and disassemble calipers and just rebuild the whole system. Because you'd be surprised at how much sludge will build up inside a brake caliper or a master cylinder. And if you don't get it out of there and you just put new fluid in, or you just put a new line on and fluid, you end up with problems down the road again still. All right, the new Patriot brake line kit. Comes with all new crush washers and the 4 lines. However, we are going to have to reuse our banjo bolts. So I'm going to take a few minutes to go clean those up on the wire wheel, and I'll be back. Now, I didn't want to bore y'all too much with the cleaning procedure on this, but basically what I do with these banjo bolts, as you can see, they basically look like brand new bolts when I'm done with them. Now, I've had them so bad before that I've had to soak them in like a carburetor solution overnight. But in this case, they really weren't that bad. Now, these appear to be stainless steel, so even as old as they are, there was no rust or anything on them. But what I do is I have a bench-mounted grinder with a brass wire wheel on it. I choose brass because it won't hurt the threads on these. And every once in a while, you'll find these in aluminum. And if you're using a steel wire wheel, you can actually distort the threads and cause threading issues. But I make sure to get the outside of it really good, make sure the threads are clean so that you don't have any problems rethreading them. Also make sure that the shoulder is nice and clean. That way your new crush washer will seat properly, get a good seal. And I got this really small wire brush that I can put in here into the end. I clean all that out. And of course you want to visually look at your holes in the side here. I guess, well, that one right there, to make sure that they're clear. Now I blow through them with brake clean when I'm all done to wash out any debris that may still be left, and then I usually take an air blower and blow through them after that, and then they're good to go, ready to use again. So now looking at the new lines, you see these are a much nicer line. They're steel braided, and they have like a smoked cover on them and a black anodized end. You can get these in any color you want. This is just the color that I chose. As far as placement goes, remember we only had one line that had that swivel fitting, so that's obviously the one that goes from the distribution block back up to the hard line at the frame. And then we have this line here, which is just a little bit longer, and that's the one that went from the master cylinder down to the frame. And then these two here are identical, so they have to be the ones to go to the left caliper and the right caliper. So we're going to turn the camera back around and we'll get these installed back on. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken the new crush washers and put them over top of the banjo bolts. One washer on each bolt for right now, just so I'm fumbling less when it comes time to assemble. And in that process, I noticed that I have 7 banjo bolts. Now each banjo bolt needs 2 crush washers. I only have 12 crush washers. So somehow we got shorted, but I'm going to start putting it together from the bottom. And I'm pretty sure I've got some more crush washers around the shop someplace. So I'm going to start with the right side line, install the banjo bolt, install the second washer. And I am just going to fish this in through here real quick. And then start the banjo bolt. Now I'm not tightening it down yet. I'm just making sure it's threaded in. I want to have some adjustability still. Grab the next banjo bolt and another washer. Install it here. Put the second washer on. And this has got to flex back this way. Got it started. Just finger tight. Okay, that line is installed. We're just going to do the same exact thing. All right, that one is started. All right, I got to give it a little twist to get this bottom one in. So now the feeder for the block. Just gently fish that through. And then we'll bring this up to here. This one doesn't use any crush washer because it's a compression type fitting. All right, now our top hose went like that, so the flat side went to the master cylinder. All right, so now we're at a point where I've got one more connection to make, but I don't have any crush washers, so I'm gonna pause the video here and go find some. All right, one thing I'd like to note with these Patriot brake lines is there is an adjustable fitting on there. So when you've got twist in your line, it adds stress to it. So you can actually adjust these fittings and rotate them around up to 180 degrees to get them to where they fit nicely without any stress or tension on them. So I was able to find another set of crush washers. So everything is installed, all the lines are in, but none of it is tight. So now I'm just gonna go through, make those adjustments, make sure there's no twists on them, make sure there's no tension that doesn't really need to be there, and then snug everything down, and we'll be ready to add fluid back to it. All right, so now I'm checking as everything turns and rotates. Nothing's binding, nothing's catching. Everything is moving very well. Test fit, make sure the fender goes back on because this line has to go through a spot in the fender. And it does. It looks like it'll fit on there just fine. Now we still have to find a replacement bolt for that as well. So I'm going to show you a little trick I use here. Just have a piece of clear flexible hose that will fit over your bleeder screw. If you get it on there and you can get it routed up, all the air bubbles will get trapped in an upward in the up line of it because air is going to rise and travel up. You usually put a catch to catch the fluid, but now as you pump the fluid and you crack open your brake line, your brake bleeder, you'll see the air come out, see the fluid come out. But the air moves to the top, the fluid stays. And then you can actually get to a point where you can just leave the bleeder screw cracked open. It will push all the air out, but because the air is going to the top, when you let off, it's only sucking fluid back in and not the air. So So see, I'm not tightening that bleeder all the way back down, but I'm topping off my fluid because it is moving fluid. Now, I don't know if you can see in the camera, but the fluid has moved all the way up to this point in the line. And there's no air in it at all. And as I continue to pump, the fluid will start to run down here into the pan. But you get to a point where no more air is coming out, which I still got a little bit. But see, I'm not opening and closing the bleeder anymore because it's not sucking air back in because the air is moving to the top. I'm just kind of slowly closing it. I can feel it building pressure up here, so I'm going to go ahead and snug this one down. May have to come back to it again, but I'm pretty confident that we got most of the air out of that side at least. Pull that off, let it drain into the pan, and then just repeat the same procedure on the other side. Crack that open. Try to catch everything to the pan here. Now I said I've cracked it open, I have it pumped, and I can see that fluid starting to rise in that line already, and that's a good thing. All right, and it looks like I don't have any air on that side either. So now with both sides closed, I should have a pretty good lever feel. And I do, that actually feels pretty good. Yeah, that lever feels pretty good. I can't get to go back to the bar. It's not spongy. All right, so it looks like we've got all the air out of the system. So I'm just cleaning my cap assembly. Make sure there's no dirt, debris on it, no water, no moisture of any kind. And we'll reinstall it. All right, everyone, I think we're gonna call that the end of this video. I've made all the connections. We double checked all the connections. I don't see any signs of leaks. The lever pressure feels really good. I have no reason to believe that there's going to be any problem with it. But the sun is starting to go down. It's starting to get cold out here in the shop. So I'm just gonna clean up my tools, and then we'll continue this project on another day. We still have to reassemble the motorcycle and do a road test. I can do that before the relays come in. And then when the relay comes in for the other problem, we can go ahead and get that switched out. So, all right, so I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Turn on that bell if you want the notifications. And until the next time, keep those engines running.